Hello, everybody. My name's Chris. Nobody in particular. I uh, I found myself in a position where I am endlessly curious and in a position, a career path that allows me to absorb content, specifically audio content, um, ebooks, audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube channels, different sources of media, and I've always been fascinated specifically with connections, especially from an interdisciplinary perspective. So, growing up, I always found that the material that I was always able to utilize the best was material that I could connect to another topic. So, geometry in architecture or conceptualization of uh, anatomy and physiology with fluid dynamics or um, maybe potentially like understanding the mathematics behind a topic and incorporating it into the theory or like what you see in the clinical world. So I found that that gave me a lot of thirst, especially for material that I could incorporate into my worldview, and it's kind of culminated into a point where I have a lot of input and there's some refinery in that input. So as information comes in, it gets filtered through my own subjective lens. And what I really want to do, and what I've always strived to do, is be able to put that in a form where I could use that information, create a narrative with it, create an axiom, a belief system, and challenge fundamental views. And the best way to challenge things is to pose them and to teach them and to have people argue against you. And I think that's the dynamic I really want to go for here is I want to project a belief, back it up with substantiate it, and then challenge it both from the perspective of just saying it in a documented format and then having other people argue against it and basically cementing my belief system to myself and to others and create a channel or create an avenue for people to voice their own opinions as those opinions gain popularity, or probably a more appropriate term is consensus. um, Utilize that consensus as a means to enable a dialogue. um, that's the purpose of this channel. How it's going to be and all that stuff, I have no idea. I mean, I've never done any of this stuff before. I'm not particularly good with editing or producing or any of that content. So a lot of this can be very ad hoc. The second element here for this specific video was kind of a generalized introduction. So related to the channel, I am nobody in particular. The only claim to fame I can even make is, I mean, I'm a pharmacist. That's not particularly going to be relevant for this channel, although I'm sure somebody will may AMA at some point or just question me about something medication oriented, and I might be able to facilitate. Um, I'm a 29-year-old individual who was raised from a relatively benign background, upper low class to somewhat middle class now. Um, Not by any prospects of my own, mostly through luck and just I'll categorize it mostly as luck, and by luck I mean more so just circumstance, happenstance, just series of events that, while I tend to very much believe the world is malleable to some degree by our actions, our decisions, that we have an effect on the world. I tend to view it that the world, from the macro perspective, is in motion, and trying to disable or hinder that momentum is very hard. Typically, the forces have to be in place to enable from the micro level, from the bottom up, to change the world as a whole. So I tend to describe it as like an external locus of control. I'm sorry, an internal locus of control, but a predominance or a dominance, I should say, of external forces. Um, I've seen a lot of stuff going around on Twitter and on a variety of social media avenues that suggest things like, you're here, these are all the life decisions you've made, these are all the life decisions you're going to make, and you're in control of everything that comes afterwards. Everything that came before is already set in stone, yada, yada, yada. And I ascribe to that heavily. I believe that we do make our decisions ultimately, that the whole point in life is to pursue the best possible outcomes for the self, for your community, for your environment, for your family, whatever has value to you, meaning. But I also tend to believe that a lot of the distribution of outcomes that are possible in this life are very heavily influenced by factors that you simply have no control over. Um, Anecdotal, but things like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs being born in the same week, and a variety of instances where, like, if you just take arguments to the absurd, like take any prominent individual and place them in a different time zone, what is the likelihood that they would maintain as successful a life or would be able to rise the ranks from whatever degree of success you would define, whether that be social, spiritual, financial, physical, what have you, and take them and see whether or not they'd be able to progress in the same manner. So incorporating that into my worldview, I think realism is very important. I think notionally, the most undervalued concepts in teaching, in academia, in finance, in geopolitics is nuance, secondary to this notion of interplay, how a system affects a system in a different definition, reflexivity. And beyond that, um, I think that almost always it's important to question the assumptions that are presented to you. I find that I've found myself flipping perspectives and sides back and forth with decreasing degrees of confidence in that view. So there was once a time when I held a belief that the US was absolutely infallible, that it had no capacity to lose, that the dominance portrayed by the US was absolute. And then seeing some of the issues internally here in the US, thought to myself the exact opposite, that maybe the US would be torn apart from within. And then there were times when I saw other powers like Russia or China or even some of the established powers within the EU community as potentially threats to the US. And then I realized, oh, that's simply not true. The US is in a position of strength. And then I thought to myself, based on the extrapolation of the Chinese progress from a financial and economic perspective, they might overtake the US. I might have started learning Mandarin or what have you. And I found that this back and forth flip flop, the US, other places, from a geopolitics perspective, a geopolitical perspective. I've also found myself from like a financial perspective, assumedly originally believing in fractional reserve banking initially and this concept of inflation and the most mainstream version of finance. And over time, finding elements of it that questioned a lot of the assumptions embedded. And I found that what really mattered at the end of the day was the nuance in your understanding of that topic matter, the elements that you just assumed and left completely unexplored. And then, really, what I think almost all discussions and dialogues and arguments get down to is nuance. Again, I'll keep stating that, but time frames, timelines, and degrees of emphasis. So, somebody could state, for example, stock A is going to go up by a multiple of 10. The three arguments there are the nuance to their belief as to why the stock will increase. Is it flows? Is it fundamentals? Is it a rotation within a sector? Is it based on a geopolitical strategy? What have you? That's where a lot of people argue. The second fundamental factor that people argue is timeframes. Yeah, it may 10x, but in the short term, it may decrease by 30%. Or the path dependency for it to 10x may not be as you portray it. Is it short term? What is short term? Is your definition short term a year? Is it 3 days? Is it 6 months? Is it a longer time frame? And that's really hard to keep consistent in a dialogue. And then the last point is the weighting perspective. So you may think stock X will go up 10x, but I may think the sector as a whole is going to decrease significantly. So those are competing viewpoints that tend to clash surrounding why we think something will occur. Kind of gets back to the nuance element. But what I really want to get into this channel is questioning assumptions, delving deeper into the beliefs that people hold, and then trying to apply basic, I hate the word first principles or the notion of first principles, but just conceptual understandings. And those seem at odds. Nuance and concepts tend to be opposing by definition. Nuance suggests detailed, gritty, granular, objective truth. Concepts tend to be an overarching 30,000-foot overview of a topic. I tend to find that conceptual understanding with a nuance to the outcomes gives you a stronger reinforced conceptual understanding or conceptual belief of what's going on. Um, so again, I'll reiterate it. The whole premise of this channel, what I really want to do is really just have a dialogue. In my world, in the social world that I'm in currently, I don't really have that many outlets to really challenge my own belief system, to refine them, to mold them into a more framed argument. And all we ever strive to be in this world is less wrong. And I would love to be less wrong with you. So let's work off that notion. I'll start just throwing live videos out there. Hopefully, at some point, I'll figure out how to do more structured, more appropriate videos, maybe even make a theme out of it. But right now, my only objective is just to get videos out there, get some viewership, hopefully get a more consistent schedule associated. My intention is to post daily, multiple times a week, so there's never a lack of content, and just go from concept to concept as I can think about them. And as soon as I have one, just put it out there, incorporate the videos together, and then as I get a dialogue going, have individuals challenge me, put me in my place. I welcome the challenge and go from there. Thank you for any time that anyone gives me. And I know in this world where information, data, concepts, the ever expansion of the complexity of our world, you giving me your time is way more than I could already ask for. So again, my name's Chris. Channel's name is going to be Nuance and Nihilism. And nihilism for the reality of our world, incorporate realism into it, but also realize that you're in control. To whatever degree you can be in control. Bye, guys.